What if everything we think we are is wrong? What if everything we believe to be true is nothing but an illusion? An illusion that leaves us dissatisfied, carrying within us an emptiness we cannot seem to fill. A sense of incompleteness that many of us feel deep inside. Today we are taught the idea that the strongest, or rather, the most adaptable, is the one who deserves to prevail. In this narrative, the concept of adaptability has replaced that of strength, making it more acceptable and politically correct. But in the end, it's merely a matter of semantics. The outcome remains the same. The fittest takes over the less fit. This principle is presented to us as a universal law, a rule that governs not only the universe itself, but also the social, economic, and political structures of our time. This is the dogma, the ideological framework upon which our entire reality is built. And it is precisely this foundation that makes everything happening around us seem acceptable. Wars, inequities, oppression. If this is the nature of the universe, then, after all, we can do little but accept it and obey this grim reality. If it appears unfair, unjust, or ruthless, so be it. We are biological machines, born into a material universe, forced to struggle against one another in order to survive. But are we certain that this foundation is correct? Are we sure this is truly our destiny? What if all of this were a deception, a terrible error born of the short-sighted opportunism of those who profit from such a vision of the universe? Today we will embark on an extraordinary journey, a journey that will challenge everything we think we know. With the help of recent discoveries, we will attempt to trace a new path, one that seeks to uncover our true identity. But before we begin, if you haven't done so already, we invite you to subscribe to the channel and share our work, because your support is the only way we can continue this project and push the boundaries of knowledge. Our journey begins with a relatively recent event, December 3rd, 2018. After a long journey of nearly 2 years, NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft finally reached the asteroid Bennu, a small celestial body just over 500 meters in diameter, yet carrying with it an ancient history dating back to the origins of the solar system. For 2 years, the probe orbited Bennu, studying its surface and mapping its composition. The data it gathered confirmed what scientists had long suspected. Bennu is a cosmic fossil, a primordial fragment that may hold the fundamental ingredients of life itself. For 2 years, the probe orbited around the asteroid, analyzing its surface and mapping its composition. The data collected confirmed what scientists had long suspected. Bennu is a cosmic fossil, a primordial fragment that may contain the fundamental ingredients of life. In 2020, the crucial moment of the mission arrived. OSIRIS-REx touched the surface of Bennu with its robotic arm, and within just a few seconds, gathered a precious sample of dust and rock fragments. It was a delicate maneuver, made even more dramatic when NASA engineers discovered that the sample container had been damaged, risking the loss of part of the material into space. Fortunately, they managed to secure the precious cargo, and the spacecraft began its long journey back to Earth. On September 24, 2023, after another 2 years of travel, OSIRIS-REx completed its mission. The capsule containing the Bennu sample re-entered Earth's atmosphere and landed in the Utah desert. At last, scientists were able to analyze the collected material, and what they discovered was staggering. Bennu revealed evidence that could transform our understanding of life in the universe. But not only that, as we will see later, it may also offer a new perspective on our very existence. So what exactly was found in the sample retrieved by OSIRIS-REx? Analyses of the samples taken from asteroid Bennu revealed the presence of complex organic compounds, including amino acids and nucleobases. Amino acids are the fundamental building blocks of proteins, while nucleobases, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, and uracil, are the essential components of DNA and RNA. The presence of these compounds suggests that the conditions necessary for life to emerge may have been widespread throughout the primordial solar system. This significantly increases the possibility that life may have developed on other planets or moons as well. The immediate deduction one can draw is that if these molecules, the very foundations of biological life, are present on a celestial body, that predates the birth of Earth, then life itself could be a cosmic phenomenon, not something exclusive to our planet. Furthermore, this discovery strengthens the position of researchers who, over the years, have supported the theory of panspermia. The idea that life may have spread throughout the universe via asteroids, comets, and meteorites, carrying its essential components from one planet to another. According to this hypothesis, the building blocks of life did not emerge spontaneously on Earth, but were instead seeded across space, taking root wherever the conditions were favorable for their development. If this were true, it would solve one of the great mysteries regarding the origin of life on Earth, namely, how the very first organic molecules formed on our planet. However, this would only push the question further up the chain of inquiry. If the building blocks that allowed life to develop arrived from space, then where and how did they originally form? The first obvious conclusion we might reach is that if life exists in the cosmos, it means the universe itself has the capacity to host it. This may seem like an obvious statement, but when we look closely at how the universe was formed, it is anything but. Among all the variables that could have made our universe inhospitable to life, we instead find ourselves in conditions that not only allowed life to emerge, but also to flourish. This is no trivial detail because it all happened thanks to a series of cosmic coincidences that made the universe extraordinarily well-suited to host life. Just consider that the physical constants of the universe, such as the speed of light, gravity, and the nuclear forces, are calibrated with incredible precision. Even the slightest variation in these constants would have made it impossible for stars, planets, and consequently organic molecules to form. So we could say that, through a chain of random events, our universe is predisposed to generate life forms, ranging from the simplest to the most complex. Even though we do not yet fully understand how this process occurs, from a materialistic perspective, we might say that the universe, through a series of extraordinary coincidences, functions like a lucky, or unlucky, depending on the point of view, machine capable of generating life. The first question we might ask is whether life is merely the product of random mechanical events. If, as we said, we adopt a materialist outlook, the answer can only be yes. But as we shall see, the reality unfolding before our eyes is far more complex and mysterious than we are able to imagine. The universe, then, would appear to be a machine capable of generating life, both in its simple, elementary forms and in its more complex ones. Among the complex forms, we can classify the human being. In the past, philosophers and scientists regarded humans as fundamentally different from other life forms, because we seem capable of feelings, emotions, and thoughts that set us apart as unique within the biological world. In other words, human beings were believed to possess something more, what we call consciousness, an element considered exclusive to us and denied to other forms of life. However, with the progress of scientific knowledge, we have reached the conclusion that what was once defined as consciousness is nothing more than the result of simple electrical interactions between neurons, a kind of emergent phenomenon arising from the greater complexity of our brain compared to that of other living beings. Consciousness, at least according to the dominant materialist paradigm, would therefore be nothing but an illusion, a direct consequence of neuronal activity without any real independent existence. The supporting evidence for this theory lies in the fact that any damage to the brain compromises the state of consciousness, seemingly proving that the mind is tightly bound to matter, with nothing existing beyond it. But are we truly certain that things are this way, or are we once again facing something far more complex? Up to this point, we have confined ourselves to analyzing the universe through classical physics, a model that describes the world through precise and deterministic laws. But with the advent of quantum physics, our certainties have been completely overturned. Classical physics portrays the universe as a gigantic, perfectly predictable machine in which everything follows exact rules. Yet at the beginning of the 20th century, with the birth of quantum physics, this vision was shattered. One of the most astonishing experiments to challenge our conception of reality is the double-slit experiment. Imagine taking a box full of balls and throwing them against a wall with two slits. We would expect the balls to pass through one of the two slits and accumulate behind them, forming two distinct stripes. So far, everything seems normal. Now let's perform the same experiment with electrons, the tiny particles that make up matter. If we launch them one by one at the slits, something inexplicable happens. Instead of forming two stripes, the electrons create a pattern of alternating bands, as if they behave not like particles, but like waves spreading out. It is as if each electron, on its own, passed through both slits simultaneously, interfering with itself, just as a wave does on the surface of water. But the most astonishing thing happens when we place a detector to see which slit the electron passes through. At that very moment, almost as if by magic, the electron stops behaving like a wave and reverts to acting like a particle, passing through only one of the two slits and forming two simple stripes. This means that the mere act of observing the electron changes its behavior. In other words, reality at the quantum level does not exist in a definite way until it is observed. If this happens in the very particles that make up our universe, we must ask ourselves, what does it truly mean to observe? And who or what is observing reality to bring it into existence? If we dare to push beyond known limits, we may conclude that if the universe requires observation to exist, this implies the existence of a primordial consciousness, a conscious principle capable of interacting with reality. From this perspective emerges one of the most revolutionary hypotheses of modern physics. Consciousness may not be a simple byproduct of the brain, but rather a fundamental property of the universe itself. At this point, a crucial question arises. How does this primordial consciousness connect to our individual consciousness? Emotions, thoughts, memory, everything that makes up our subjective experience cannot be measured with the tools of classical science. While it is true that we can analyze the electrical activity of neurons and measure brain impulses, it is equally true that we cannot explain where awareness itself originates. I consider consciousness to be fundamental, with matter arising as a derivative of consciousness. We cannot go beyond consciousness. Everything we speak of, everything we regard as existing, requires consciousness. Some scientists and philosophers of mind have suggested that consciousness does not reside in neurons but in a state of quantum energy, a still unknown field that interacts with reality at the subatomic level. This idea lies at the heart of the theory of quantum consciousness, proposed by physicist Roger Penrose and neuroscientist Stuart Hameroff, according to which microtubules inside neurons may function as quantum processors, linking the brain to a deeper level of reality. If this theory were correct, then consciousness would not be a product of the brain, but something pre-existing that merely uses the brain as a processing tool. This could explain phenomena still unaccounted for by science, such as near-death experiences, extrasensory perception, and even the mysterious presence of unexplained memories in certain individuals. But if consciousness were something independent of matter, we might be faced with an even more radical hypothesis. It is the universe that was created by consciousness, not the other way around. In other words, if consciousness is the fundamental principle of reality, then the universe itself could be a projection of the mind, a field of quantum possibilities that takes shape only through the act of observation. The implications of all this are immense. Not only do they challenge the materialist paradigm according to which consciousness is merely a product of the brain, but they open the door to a vision of the universe in which mind and matter are two aspects of the same reality. If consciousness is not a simple biological phenomenon, but a cosmic principle, then the fundamental question is no longer how life arose, but what is the true purpose of the universe? Perhaps what we call reality is just one of many levels of existence, and our mind is merely an echo of something much larger and deeper, a field of conscious energy that permeates the entire cosmos. If this were the case, then our existence would not be merely an accident of the cosmos, but the sign of a universe that demands to be understood through consciousness itself. The true deception we find ourselves living through today is therefore that of believing that the universe, life, and each of us are merely the product of simple mechanical laws, and that consequently, emotions, thoughts, and self-awareness are merely a side effect of this bizarre biological machine. If, however, we transcend this view and realize that every living being is part of a greater consciousness, that we are all part of a single conscious field, and at the same time each of us is unique and unknowable. We discover a different perspective on reality, and this is confirmed not only by philosophical speculation, but by quantum physics itself. In the subatomic world, in fact, the no-cloning theorem shows that a quantum state cannot be perfectly copied. There is no way to replicate all its information, since the measurement itself alters the state of the system. This means that every manifestation of the quantum field is unrepeatable and imperfectly knowable. Its nature is intrinsically unique. Similarly, the uncertainty principle prevents us from knowing all the properties of a particle with absolute precision, making it impossible to capture or exactly reproduce a quantum state in an identical context. This implies that the signature of every living system, if interpreted in quantum terms, is exclusive and inimitable. It is as if each of us, as part of this vast field, carries an irreproducible trait, a way of being that no measurement can ever fully capture or duplicate. Thus, while our individual consciousness makes us feel separate from one another, quantum physics suggests that we are intimately connected in a universal field where everything is interconnected and where each remains irreducibly unique. Now let's return to our everyday reality and try to frame our existence from this perspective. If each of us, in our uniqueness, is part of a greater and universal whole, can we accept a reality in which the strongest dominates the weakest? Can we accept that the uniqueness of each of us is mocked, humiliated, and erased? In reality, what quantum physics seems to reveal today is not a discovery, but a rediscovery of a theme that many ancient traditions have explored with different words and symbols. The Indian Upanishads, for example, speak of a profound identity between the Atman, the individual self, and Brahman, the supreme principle, showing us how each individual, while remaining themselves, is an inseparable part of a greater whole. In China, the Tao is that flow that envelops and encompasses every manifestation, while in the pre-Columbian cultures of the Andes, the concept of peace reveals a living cosmos in which every form of life is a unique expression of the same fabric. Similar insights emerge among Native American peoples, who conceive of the Great Spirit as a single cosmic family, and in the African values of Ubuntu, where each individual self is realized only by virtue of a collective we. In all these ancient visions, the plurality of living beings is never in conflict with the essential unity of the cosmos, but represents its infinite richness. Each existence bears within itself a unique imprint, an inimitable fragment of that totality. This is why, more than a completely new concept, quantum physics seems to provide a modern language for returning to an ancient wisdom. Everything is one, yet every fragment of that oneness remains the bearer of a diversity that never repeats itself in the same way. If all this were true, then we are not merely biological machines, programmed to compete until the inevitable end of the universe. If all this were true, chance, those fortuitous events that we believe are what gave birth to our being and which we have elevated to dogma, are revealed to be in fact mistaken. If the OSIRIS-REx probe made a very long journey to a small asteroid to understand the origin of life, today we know that to understand the origin and purpose of life and the universe, perhaps it would be enough to look inside each of us. At this point, we're really curious to hear your opinion. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support our work. See you in the next story. Hi, I'm John. Our journey into mystery continues. If you want to uncover more hidden truths and answers to the greatest enigmas, leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Together we'll explore the unknown, and who knows what secrets we'll find.